What's going on? All thanks for tuning in once again. Let's talk Derek Chisora versus Deontay Wilder. So the fight, is coming close, 2 weeks away. Final prediction, final prediction of this fight. I think that Deontay Wilder, for him, it's definitely a must-win. As Derek Chisora is saying, he's going to retire Wilder, and I think that will be the case if Wilder loses. I don't think that Wilder will continue if he loses to Chisora, especially if he knocks him out, because Chisora is coming to knock him out. Just like he did Wallen, he was coming with pressure, he was coming with relentless fear, he was coming forward, front foot heavy. That's what I'm expecting against Wilder, and Wilder's a guy that does have the equalizer. He does do a lot of things wrong. He did start the sport late, but he does have one of the best right hands in boxing. So the question that I have is that, does that right hand still exist? Does that power where the guy's legs go and things like that, he throws that right hand and all of a sudden the guy loses his legs and he's on the canvas, does that power still exist? We never saw that against Herndon. What we saw with Herndon was more jabs, more hooks. We saw a Wilder trying to re-establish himself, trying to box, but we did see a Wilder coming forward. But with Chisora, he's going to have to throw all that out the window, Never mind throwing the jabs, throwing the hooks, trying to, box the guy, because Chisora's going to be right in his face. He needs to try to set up a picture-perfect right hand, right? And it has to be a right hand that ends the fight. I don't see Wilder beating Chisora on points. I think that Chisora, given that he's beaten Joe Joyce, Olympic medalist, he's beaten Otto Wallen, a guy that's a decent boxer. He's beaten both of these guys on points. He's dropped both of these guys. So Wilder's gonna feel like he's behind on the scorecards, as he mostly is, and he's gonna need the knockout. So does that right hand still exist? That's the big question that I have, because I haven't seen it in the last 3 fights. With Chisora, it seems like the engine has still got some mileage on it. He's still got power, he's still got force, he's still got the pressure that he brings to the fight. So I don't know about this one. Wilder's a plus 280. That's hard to ignore. Chisora's fighting in his home turf, so he's going to be more fired up than ever. Hotel California walking in, gonna be just fired up, to go in there and try to get the job done. So it's plain and simple, if the right hand exists, Wilder can end the show. But he needs to do it in a smart way, He can't afford Chisora to do what he did against Wallen, where he had his head on his chest and he was just letting his hands go, destroying the guy, knocking him down close range. He can't afford to make it that fight too early, where he gets chained out and hurt, and Chisora's gonna hit him all angles. So as long as he can avoid that sort of fight, where he's not on the ropes and he has the punch. If he's throwing that right hand and Chisora's still standing there and it's clean shots and Chisora's still coming forward, that's it. That's the fight. I don't see Wilder surviving, after round 5 if he can't get Chisora's respect with the right hand. You know, get Chisora backing up a bit. You know, he can't afford Chisora to just press him and basically get into a more on the ropes. I'm still gonna go with Deontay Wilder, the underdog. It's hard, like I said, it's hard to look past the plus 280. It is an underdog going in there, but he's got a big punch. He's got a big punch on him. One of the biggest punches in boxing is that straight right hand of Wilder. So, that being said, I think that he will catch Chisora coming forward. It'll be like a counter punch, you know, it'll be one of those moments where he beats him to the punch. And I think it happens later in the fight. Because Chisora is a guy that, you know, although he does have a good engine on him, he tends to drop gears. You know, he'll be going in the 5th gear, and then he'll drop to the 1st gear. You know, he starting his engine again. You know, he takes some time off during the fight. You know, some rounds he looks great, some rounds he doesn't. It just depends on the fighter, you know, what the fighter brings to him. But, you know, you see that with Chisora. Look, he looks like he's gassed out, like he's given everything in the first 4 rounds, and then all of a sudden, you know, he's back to starting the car. You know, he's back to low volume punching and basically just surviving rounds. Then he comes out next round throwing. You know, that's what I've noticed from Chisora, and I think that with Wilder, that's what he looks for. You know, he looks for guys that switches off just a split second or like a couple of seconds. He finds guys doing the same pattern, or, you know, he sees that they have not been throwing as much, and then he capitalizes. You know, then he throws that right hand, and that's how he normally wins fights. You know, where guys have switched off for a minute, or like, you know, for a split second, you could say. Then he catches him. You know, that's all it takes for Wilder. It's just one wrong move, and that's it. But he did hit Zhang with a couple of right hands. He did hit Joseph Parker with a clean right hand, but it wasn't flush. You know, but on both occasions, and also Herndon, you know, you hit him with a couple of right hands. And all those 3 occasions, you know, he wasn't able to close the show. But I think in this fight, it's going to be a big question. Does he have the right hand? If he doesn't, that's it. If he does, I think he does get Chisora. But he has to survive, like Usyk did, the first 4-5 rounds. That's my take anyway. Leave yours, and I'll catch you next time.